Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe and this is a one-on-one interview with Charlotte Duncker, a sports reporter at The Times. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. After yesterday, it's the first time in a while that you can actually say that, especially after a Liverpool game. What about you? You were at the game yesterday, weren't you?
Yeah, and I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw from Manchester United.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the media, we've been writing them off, and I think rightly so. Someone asked me yesterday if they thought the reception and how Manchester United had been viewed in those first opening two games was over the top. Personally, I think if you watch the diabolical display that they put in at Brentford, I don't personally think it was. No. So to come off the back of that and to see the difference in performance, like just 9 days later, I think most people in that stadium were probably surprised, including probably Jurgen Klopp, even though he wouldn't want to admit it.
Well, yeah, I think he was banking on the game being called off, wasn't he? Because his players certainly didn't turn up. Do you think that can be the sort of the kickstarter for some success for United now? Do you think it will be a sort of, flash in the pan? I suppose the Southampton game is almost as big as the Liverpool game for that reason, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, because they don't want it just to be one big game, one big win, and then go to St Mary's at the weekend and lose, because it's all well and good, but if you've still only got 3 points from your opening 4 games, then it's not looking great for you, is it? But I think one of the biggest things from yesterday was the big decisions that Ten Hag made. He's not been here for very long. He decided to drop Harry Maguire to the bench and Cristiano Ronaldo, and I think, and he bought Malacia and didn't he at left back, and I think they were 3 big decisions that all paid off. So if he's doing that 3 games into the season, and that's the sort of authority he has over the squad, I think in the past they're not necessarily decisions you would have seen made by a manager at that stage. Yeah. They would have just stuck with it and thought, no, we'll somehow get through. He's seen what he thought was wrong in the performances. He's wanted to make a change. He's made big calls, stamped his authority, and it's paid off. So I think if he continues to he needs to stick with that now, because I think that team, the way they performed, obviously you've got Casemiro that you can potentially bring into the mix at the weekend. But he's got to stick with what he believes is the best thing for the team. And if that's leaving your big names on the bench, then so be it.
It almost feels like Ronaldo's in obviously it's not good that he's droppable, but he's almost in a position now where he's the most droppable he's ever been, if you know what I mean. And it also coincides with the fact that he wants to leave. It gives Ten Hag, it allows a big decision to be a little bit easier, doesn't it? The fact that he's not been there for pre-season and he wants to leave. When you look at last season, yes, he scored loads of goals, but sometimes it was almost all about him and no one else. Yeah. Ten Hag can make that decision and not get too much backlash from the fans or from the press, and that's almost not easy, because it's still hard to drop Cristiano Ronaldo, but it makes that a bit of an easier task than it normally would be, doesn't it, dropping it?
Yeah, imagine if he'd started the first 3 games of the season and scored a hat-trick in every single game. All the fans would be turning around and thinking there's absolutely no way you can sell this guy. But if you look at the way they performed at Old Trafford against Liverpool without him in the team, I think there's proof there that I still think they need strengthening up front, don't get me wrong, but I think there's proof there that it's not going to be the be-all and end-all if he leaves. And if you look at Manchester United historically in the past, I know everyone says they shouldn't hark back to the past, but you go back to the days of Ferguson and then everything like that, he would never have a player in the team who said he didn't want to be there. I think the difficulty you've got at the minute is all those big names that Ronaldo was linked with at the start of the window, they all turned around and they thought about it and they said, no, thank you. So they've distanced themselves from it. So George Mendes is now trying last minute again in a window to try and get him a move. So it's going to be down to him in terms of where can he go? Is that team going to be able to pay his wages? What time of the window is that going to happen? We're running out of time. It's next week, isn't it? The end of the window, next Thursday. Yeah. So it's just all very last minute from him, isn't it? But I personally think if United can get a deal done with someone else, to let him go, because he's a very expensive player to have on the bench. I know you can talk about his experience and stuff like that, but does he bring a bit of disharmony to the team? Quite possibly. So personally, I think if the right offer comes in, they should. And I think United have come round to that idea more than they were maybe at the start of the window. That's
the crucial thing, isn't it? Because you would expect any manager to say he's not for sale, he's not going anywhere, because they don't want to lose him for cut price. Do you think United are willing to sell him now? Because that's it's almost like we're talking a minute, like you said, about reinforcements and Antony and Gakpo and other players we've been linked with, but it almost feels like we're preparing for a Ronaldo-less United at the moment, rather than doing everything we can to get him in there.
But the thing is, at the start of the window, when it wasn't even being mentioned that Ronaldo was potentially going to leave, and he hadn't not gone on the pre-season tour, and he hadn't said that he wants to go, United still knew that they needed to strengthen up front. So even if he was staying, they still realistically wanted someone else. I think you look at Antony Martial, came back from loan, he impressed him pre-season, then he got that injury. I thought he did well when he came on in the second half against Liverpool. So maybe they were banking on him not quite having the start that he's had, and I wanted to have that reinforcement. But if you look at last season, they relied on him too much, Ronaldo, didn't they? I know Martial wasn't there, but he's getting on. He's not the player he once was. If you look at the way that Ten Hag wants to play, is he necessarily the perfect person for that system? I'd argue not. So even if you put Ronaldo to one side and say he was going to stay, United still were looking at reinforcements across that front line. So whether he stays or he goes, personally, I still think they need to bring someone else in.
Yeah, and he's still 37 years old as well, isn't he? So even if he was the best player in the world, in 2 years' time, he won't be, because you can't, how often is the best player in the world 39? So even if he was staying and he was great, we'd still need a replacement, let alone if he's not so good and if he's not even staying. So yeah, I think we have to move forward with more players in that position. One player that we have brought in, obviously, Casemiro, shown on the pitch yesterday before the game. That felt like, obviously, when Varane got announced on the pitch, that felt like a massive moment. But with the protests and with the turmoil off the pitch, well, on the pitch and off the pitch, that almost felt like it got kind of just sort of mixed into the night a little bit. But that's a massive signing, that, isn't it, Casemiro? Do you think Ten Hag is happy with that? Obviously, he's saying how happy he is, but it seemed as though De Jong was the first choice. Do you think Casemiro is still right up there in terms of Ten Hag's priorities?
Well, I think if you look in terms of Casemiro, he's a world-class midfielder, isn't he? So any manager is going to be happy to bring in that sort of profile into the team in terms of, look how much he's won, look how much experience he's got, look how good he is in the position that he plays. I think he's better than what United have got in that position at the moment. But if you spent the whole summer going after Frankie de Jong, he's a very different type of midfielder to him. We know that Frankie de Jong was the number one transfer target. They didn't manage to get him. Things have gone wrong in the opening 2 games of the season, and now they've changed to get Casemiro. I'm not saying it's a bad transfer at all. I think it's really good, and everyone's gone about how much money he's costing and his age and his wages and stuff. But the money in this transfer window has just gone absolutely ridiculous. Just look at what Chelsea play for Cucurella. So I just think there's all different things you can point at it, but if he comes in and brings a surety, especially in front of the back line, because you look how many, 6 goals, wasn't it, they conceded in their opening 2 games? So if you've got him sitting in front of the back 4, and I think every United fan's eyes rolled when they saw the first team sheet of the season, and it was McTominay and Fred starting in those positions again. So you're bringing in a world-class midfielder in that position, then I think it is going to boost the team, strengthen the team, but is it going to be the difference maker? I'd argue not. And then, as I said, you look at the difference between him and De Jong. When they signed him, they were basically, didn't say De Jong's dead, because I'm sure if he turned around tomorrow and said, I've changed my mind, I 100% want to come, they'd maybe try and find a way to do it. But I think they said very unlikely to get both of them through now in this window, so one for the future. But interesting what you said about him being unveiled, because I thought the same. I was there as well when Varane came on, but I think part of that was no one knew. Even we were all in the press box, and there'd been a few murmurings like, oh, do you think they're going to bring Varane out? And then they managed to sneak him into the stadium. No one saw him get in, and no one knew he was there. And then suddenly he was brought out on the pitch, and there was this big surprise, and everyone was off their seats and excited. Whereas, like you said, yesterday there was the protest, so the stadium wasn't 100% full at the time he was brought out, and the club had announced that he was going to be brought out. Whether, I don't know if they did it on their official channels, but I know the media were told, so it was out there. And there was a video of him walking into the stadium, wasn't there? So everyone knew he was there.
I want to know how they got Varane in. Do you know when Jose went into the little washing cart into his dressing room? I reckon Varane was crunched up in some little drinks buggy, getting pushed in.
I remember talking to someone about it, saying like, "How did you get?" He's not the smallest of guys, is he? I was like, "How did you get him in without anyone noticing?" And I think, exactly, one of them. No, they just kept trying to keep it under their hat in case they want to do it again. But there was no hiding Casemiro, was there? He strolled straight through. Everyone was running after them with their phones out. So. I think that had an element to do with it yesterday in terms of there wasn't that surprise. And like you say, there were other things going on, and the protest continued while he was brought out, which I just think shows the strength of the feeling against the protest in terms of, great, we've brought this signing in, but that's not going to silence us. So I thought that was a strong moment from the people who were doing the protest, the supporters there. So, I think that's probably, you are right. I think that might be why there was a different vibe to it.
Yeah. Just on other reinforcements then, it seems like it's sort of, we're in this weird no man's land with Antony, where some people saying we've bid 90 million euros, some people saying 80, some people saying it's been rejected, and there's more, like, just an infinite kind of barrage of updates on him from different people. What's sort of your understanding of United's interest in Antony, and do you think he's the right sort of player for Man United?
I think, from how I understand it, earlier in the window, because I think Ajax were wanting around between 70 and 80, and United basically said, no, that's too much. We're going to look at other players. Now they've gone back to him. I think 90 million is a lot, unless you really, really, really desperately want that sort of player. From what I was told at the beginning of the window, it was under the understanding that they wanted a player who could, like, more of a number 9, someone who would play all the time through the middle. He's more of a winger. Not that he couldn't play across the front 3, but I think that's what they're after now, is someone. The change has been they want someone who's more flexible, someone who can play anywhere across the front 3. We saw Marcus Rashford play through the middle, didn't we? And then he moved out wide when Martial came on. So Antony, I think, there's definitely interest there. Cody Gakpo, you mentioned before. He's another one they're interested in. But I think the problem United have got now is they're in a tough negotiating position, because as we said, the window shuts in 9 days, 10 days' time. Everyone knows the start they've had to the season. Everyone knows that they still want to bring players in. So if you're the selling club, you're going to put another 10, 20 million on your asking price.
Especially Ajax now. They've sold 6 or 7 players. They've absolutely gutted that team out, and he's their sort of last remaining star. They're going to chuck loads of money.
And there's the little slidings being put in. Why would you go there? They're not in the Champions League. They're not a Champions League team. And it's like, well, do these players want to join a project that they think is going to get back into the Champions League, or are they after immediate success? Because if they're after immediate success, then Manchester United is not the place to go at the moment, is it? No. If we're being honest about it.
But also the other thing with that is the whole Champions League thing. Yes, obviously United aren't in it at the moment, but Ajax, their odds of winning it are incredibly slim. When's the last time they won it? 1993. Like, I know obviously United aren't looking close either, but it's hardly a dig you can say when they've won it one time in 20 or 30 years, and United have won it twice in that time and got to 2 more finals. So anyway, it annoys when people say that, like, oh, you play for the Champions League. All right, go and play for Fenerbahce then, and just get knocked out of the group stage. Yes, you played in the Champions League,
you get a few little bonuses as well.
I suppose you do, but it's about having a chance of winning it, isn't it? Anyway, moving on a little bit then. So forward line, Antony, Gakpo, they seem to be the only 2 names we're linked with at the moment. Like you said, a number 9 was kind of suggested, wasn't it? But then there doesn't seem to be any names sort of backing that up. It's almost as though we've gone, Martial can do that, Rashford can do that, Ronaldo may well stay, and like you said, there is some suggestion that Antony can play across that line if he has to. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of links with a new goalkeeper. Kevin Trapp's the most recent one that I've seen mentioned. Do you think United are in for a new goalkeeper? And this rumour that it went from being just a backup, a couple of million, to all of a sudden, 7, 10, 15 million plus, depending on who's available.
I think they need... If we look at De Gea's performances at the start of the season, now Dean Henderson's been taken out of the equation. I think Dean Henderson really pushed De Gea to improve, because he was a legitimate number 2, as in terms of, like, I could take your position here. So I think they would do right to spend that sort of money on a backup, as you'd say, but someone who could legitimately threaten for his place. Ten Hag was, I think, quite complimentary about De Gea last night after his debacle against Brentford. But the interesting decision for me was that obviously they allowed Dean Henderson to go out on loan, which has been very well publicised.
And it's so weird how that all happened, wasn't it? Where it was sort of Dean Henderson was the one who decided he was going. Never really even trained properly in front of Ten Hag. Never had much of a meeting. and he's like, I'm not having this, I'm going. And then all of a sudden he looks great for Forest, and our goalie's rolling the ball out to their strikers. Like,
well, they're two very different styles of goalkeepers, aren't they? And I think Dean Henderson arguably would fit in better with Ten Hag's style of play than De Gea. De Gea, especially in that Brentford game, he just looks so nervous, doesn't he? It looks like he's not comfortable doing what he has been asked to do, whereas that is what Dean Henderson is comfortable to do. But as you say, he's now playing for Forest. Not that fantasy football's a thing, but I think he's the most important thing. But I think he's like the highest, got the highest points for a goalkeeper in the first.
Well, that's great, isn't it?
The first 3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, but have they beat Liverpool? I don't think so. But I noticed it was funny there, wasn't it, against Liverpool, how De Gea all of a sudden it was a system or a structure that was basically playing into his hands. He just kicked it long every time and was allowed to just make a couple of saves here and there. He wasn't asked to do that, playing it out from the back. And he looked quite good against Liverpool. But, that's the thing, though. Next week against Southampton, when all of a sudden the pressure is to play out from the back again, are we going to see mistakes creep in, pressure build up against the team? And, I still think we're still a very mentally fragile team. That, let's say De Gea did roll the ball out to their defender or did make a pass, their striker, or did make a wry pass, that I could see us crumbling again. And it is a big position, that goalkeeper, especially in modern football, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't think it's just the team either that get nervous. I think you can feel it in the stadium. Yeah. Like if he goes to pass it short or roll it out to someone, there's like a sharp intake of breath, because everyone knows that they're not comfortable in doing that. But it's a system that Ten Hag wants them to play, and if he wants them to play it, then they're just going to have to persist with it and over time hope he gets better with it. But if he doesn't think he can in the next 2 weeks, then you're right in terms of they have been looking for a backup goalkeeper. So surely the qualities of that goalkeeper that you're looking to bring in need to fit the criteria of the way you want your team to play, because you're right, he kept kicking it long last night, didn't he? But if they want to be a team that plays out from the back consistently, then they need someone who is comfortable doing that. Because if you're an opposition striker and you know that they're nervous about doing it, then that's what you're going to target, and that's how teams are going to get goals. So it's going to be interesting to see who and if they do manage to get someone else in.
Yeah. Right back's another position that like Dalot seems to have locked that place down, but he hasn't exactly been massively convincing. I think we're even comparing him to Malacia against Liverpool, even though Malacia wasn't tearing it up completely going forward. He just had so much energy and intensity, and his covering and tracking back and all that it sort of stood out, whereas Dalot has kind of been treading water a little bit on that side. Do you think we'll be after another right back as well? Because that was, again, one of those where there's loads of rumours but not really any names attached to it. Dest was mentioned for a bit and Dumfries as well, but that all seems a bit cold at the minute.
I think if you look at what they've got in the squad at the moment, I think you're likely to look for someone to leave before they're going to bring someone in, because Wan-Bissaka's obviously out of favour. I know he came off the bench, but Dalot's going to be your first choice. Then you've got Wan-Bissaka as backup, and you can have him switching sides, can't you? So I just think they would be open to letting Wan-Bissaka go for the right money. But if he went, then maybe you would see a movement there. But at the moment, what's the point in bringing in someone when you've already got a load of players in that position? So I just one of those where it comes to getting rid of players that aren't necessarily going to get many minutes, which historically Manchester United haven't been that good at.
Yeah, we've not been really good at that. Eric Bailly's gone, but Phil Jones is still there, which is interesting, isn't it, when you think the rankings of when someone stopped being the first choice defender. Phil Jones stopped being that in 2015, and he's still there. Anyway, I don't quite understand that. How much do you think Ten Hag thinks he can improve these players? Because that's something I think, obviously as fans, you almost get obsessed with transfers, and you think, how can we piece together this sort of super team to get back up towards Liverpool and City eventually? But actually, we have seen almost all of this squad finish second before, finish third before. 2 years before that, some of them finished second again under Jose. Like, it's not a team that is without, the ability to win matches and to finish high up at the table. Do you think Ten Hag is focusing a lot, or maybe more than the fans, on getting Rashford back to his best, getting more out of Fred and Sancho, who has underperformed so far? Even Varane looked, I would say that's his best performance for United last night. Yeah. How much do you think he's focusing on that? And do you think that's something that, as fans, we're kind of forgetting about in the chase for fresh new names from Real Madrid and wherever else.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that people I've spoken to at the club were saying when you're talking about bringing in all these attackers. They were saying, well, Martial's got to come back. We don't know how he's going to fare. He could come back and have a great season. Rashford had a poor season last season. Sancho's really yet to set the world alight. So if you've got those three and you've still got Ronaldo there who's chipping in 15 to 20 goals a season, and the other three totally up their game, then is that a bad attacking option? Antony Elanga to bring off the bench as well? Not really, but everyone's thinking about the performances they've seen from Antony Martial in the past. They're thinking of the Marcus Rashford from last season. They're thinking, well, we've not really seen the best of Jadon Sancho. So you're right in terms of the management needs to be looking at how they can get the best out of the players that they've got. But one of the biggest things, you've just said it there, these players have finished, most of them have finished second in the league, third in the league, and then you look at the way they went to Brentford, and also the back end of last season was dreadful as well, wasn't it? For me, it's a massive mentality thing, and Ten Hag said it yesterday after the game. He said one of the big differences, you can talk about tactics all you want, but the attitude was totally different against Liverpool, and that surely got to be one of the biggest things that he's got to drum into this team of players. It's the mindset, the mentality and the attitude to go out there and put it all on the line. Because if you look back at some of the performances at the back end of last season under Ranić, the players didn't look bothered to play. And that's not saying anything about the quality of the players. That's to do with their mindset and whether they could be bothered. I'm not saying they turned up and couldn't be bothered, but sometimes that's genuinely what it looked like.
Yeah, it did look
They've
like
not
that.
turned into terrible players overnight. They're still the same players that got Manchester United second under Solskjaer. So you get to this point and you think, what has changed so much? Because the players are still the same. But for me, it's a mentality thing, and I think that's what Ten Hag has got to get right first. And then if he can improve players individually, like the likes of Rashford, Sancho, like say Fred, McTominay, or all those sorts of players, if he can bring them up to a different level as well, then is the team looking as bad as everyone potentially thought it did?
It's mad, isn't it, how that one Liverpool game can just change the feeling so sort of massively. Like before that, it felt like you could almost, like there was a point where after the Brentford game, journalists and pundits and people on social media, you could almost say anything you wanted about United. Like, this player's crap, this player's never going to be good again, he was never even good in the first place, don't know what you're on about. Like, you could say anything and people would go, yeah, you're right, they are that bad. And then now all of a sudden everything feels like it's moving in a different direction, where we've seen, like you said, the mentality was the biggest thing last season. And that was certainly different against Liverpool, wasn't it? There was definitely a mentality change. Do you see reasons for optimism after that game? Because, or am I just being, blindly excited just because we beat Liverpool for the first time in 4 years?
I can understand why everyone has come out of the ground absolutely buzzing, because when the fans were going in there and you look at the results beforehand and the way they've been performing, and then Liverpool are coming, who the last season there was a diabolical situation for the fans, wasn't it? So I can understand why they feared the worst. I don't necessarily think you can start talking about Man United as title contenders after they've beat Liverpool, but I think they showed glimpses of what people want from watching Manchester United and what Erik Ten Hag has been after. So I think that's probably the most promising thing, because it's the first time this season, I know we're only 3 games in, that you've maybe seen what this team should look like under Erik Ten Hag. But now that thing, like you said before, if they don't go to Southampton and build on that, or at least play the same or show the same effort and aggression and passion, if it goes off again, then the same questions are going to creep back in, because you can't just win one game against one of your biggest rivals and think that all your problems have been solved. So now it's going to be about consistency for them.
Just as a final question, it's putting you on the spot a little bit.
Oh, here we go.
I'll accept that. Do you think we'll sign Antony? If based on what you know and how you see the rest of the window unfolding, do you think we'll sign him? And do you think he's the most likely person we'll sign?
I honestly think it'll sounds cliche, but come down to money. If Ajax to turn around and say, if they just keep putting the price up and suddenly say we want £95 million, personally, I think that would be a lot of money to spend on someone who was never your number one transfer target this summer. And someone like Gakpo would be a cheaper alternative. So it depends how hard a bargain they're going to drive. Straight down the middle answer there.
Nice,
Sorry.
that was good. That okay, right. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks
No
for coming
problem.
on. Great to have
Thank
you on
you.
the channel. Thank you for watching at home. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. We'll have loads more interviews. We go live every time there's any breaking news, so hit the subscribe button. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in a bit.